Previously on Supergirl, James hatched a plan to break into Lord Technologies that was so idiotic it officially made him the biggest dumbass of an episode in which General Lane also existed. The amount of incompetence it would take for the show to lower the bar that much is downright terrifying, so I'm not giving them an inch this time around. In fact, let's put a timer on the screen and see how far they can get before I see something unimaginably stupid. Okay, let's see. Maximum security jail, prisoner getting his breakfast, and wow. Just wow. They couldn't even get 1 minute in. I ask you, what the hell kind of prison facility, much less a maximum security one, allows its inmates to have toys and weapons? Considering this is the fucking Toy Man, a villain known for creating technological implements of death, the most high-tech thing this asshole should be allowed within 50 yards of is the lint in between his toes. But f that, we're just gonna let this incredibly dangerous murdering psychopath have a ventriloquist dummy to occupy himself with, not to mention a yo-yo with retractable blades that he can use to murder his guards. That is not how prisons work! Jesus Christ, less than 60 seconds into this episode and already the needle on the stupid meter has broken off. Look, at this point I know the show's not gonna get any better, but for the love of God, just so I don't hang myself from the ceiling fan, someone, please, tell me it doesn't get any worse.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
My name's not Dave! So, because the episode really wants me to get a head start on tying that noose, the DEO is planning an illegal break-in at Lord Technologies based on the intel acquired by James during his own ill-conceived breaking and entering escapades. In case you forgot, said intel was photographs of a few empty hallways and one locked door with a fancy fingerprint scanner. This is what you're basing your operation around? No offense to James, but after that fiasco last week, I don't know if you want to be relying too heavily on any information gathering done by that chucklehead.
Superman trusts him, that's good enough for me.
Superman's a huge dick! Why does him trusting James mean anything to you?
Supergirl trusts him, and that's more than good enough.
Too easy. Also, Supergirl thinks Henshaw should embrace who he is and come out as an alien. You know, because that worked out so well for her. She doesn't seem to understand that Martians and Kryptonians are different, and if people saw what he really looks like, they'd probably have a more severe reaction than the one they had to the pretty blonde who looks like the girl at the top of the cheerleader pyramid.
I want it! I'm hot! I'm everything you're not!
Not only that, but Supergirl and Alex seem really insistent that Henshaw embracing his Martianosity is the only way this Lord Technologies op can possibly work. Somehow forgetting that Supergirl has super speed and could easily zoom in and out of that place before anyone even knows she's there. He doesn't want to risk blowing his cover, but they just will not let this go, citing James as the reason why the operation is so critical.
Max beat James to a pulp for finding room 52.
Oh yeah, that poor bastard. His face is like mashed hamburger. How did he ever survive such a vicious, sadistic, unrelenting assault? It's a miracle he's even still breathing after this. Yeah, I didn't edit that either. That was the whole attack right there. Lord caught James trespassing and taking photos on his private property, punched him 4 times, then let him go with a warning without even having James arrested. Am I missing something here? Because it seems to me like James got off real easy.
You saw what Max Lord did to James.
No he didn't actually. Henshaw and James have never met before. For fuck's sake, writers, you had 1 episode to keep continuity. 1.
You thunder-headed stooges are the worst bunch of...
Cut to Catco, where Cat Grant is having a chat with Lucy. Under normal circumstances, her being related to Cat's arch-nemesis Lois Lane would have Cat baring her fangs and ready to strike like a cobra, but Cat finds Lucy's military background intriguing. Naturally, the part where she committed desertion implies a certain moral flexibility that Cat just can't wait to start cultivating. Now, the show would have us believe that Lucy simply resigned. I'm certainly no expert, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the military doesn't just let people do that. When you abandon your post without being discharged first, that's called desertion, which must look just fabulous on a resume, doesn't it?
I wanted to be effective. I wanted to serve.
But the first time I disagreed with my commanding officer, I was donezo, protocol and the law be damned. You're hired. This can only mean we're in for more awkward romance shenanigans in the workplace than anyone who's still awake by this point couldn't possibly give a shit about, but thankfully we're given a temporary respite when the feds show up. That inmate who escaped earlier is Wynn's dad, so they need to have a conversation. Of course, Wynn has more than a few issues when it comes to his father, so Kara has to do a little coaxing to get him to spill the beans that the man left him a present on his desk and wants to meet with him. So the FBI put a wire on Wynn and lay a trap for Toyman. They find him pretty easily, and since he's not even resisting arrest, they can just take him back into custody and... Holy shit! Those are some itchy trigger fingers you got there, Quick Draw. Doesn't the target have to attack or show signs of hostility before you can open fire on them? Man, this show really has no clue how the military or law enforcement work, does it? But Toyman has outfoxed them and caught the feds in a trap of his own involving poison gas and a... robot made of glass? Hardlight hologram? What the hell is that? More importantly, when the hell did he have time to set this up? He just broke out of prison a matter of hours ago after being locked up for 15 years or more, and already he's built a death trap so high-tech even Jigsaw would be like, damn, dude. Realistically, this would require a whole lot of time and resources that Toyman just doesn't have. Unless there's some kind of relative timescale at work here, and considering what happens later in the episode, we can't rule it out. I'm calling so much bullshit on this that even Cat Grant saying that she and Lois Lane are friends pales in comparison.
You know, your sister and I have been dear friends for longer than she cares to admit.
And there goes the needle on the bullshit meter, too. So Toyman is still at large, and because this C-plot is still a thing, Kara thinks Cat should have talked to James first before offering his girlfriend a job. As if that was any of his business. But since Kara really doesn't adult very well, Cat has to gently remind her that people's fee-fees shouldn't factor into business decisions.
When can we set up the TV interview? He seems like a very sensitive boy. Do you think he can cry on cue?
Unless you can exploit them for profit. Classic Cat. Kara may not be on board with this idea, but Lucy is definitely drinking the Cat Grant Kool-Aid, and she's pretty excited about the idea of working for a, quote, kick-ass woman instead of a bunch of angry old white men. Apparently it hasn't dawned on her yet that Cat Grant is also white, but I guess that's only a bad thing if you have a penis, isn't it? Good to know. Speaking of those vile penis havers, Alex and Kara have finally talked Henshaw into infiltrating Lord Technologies, because Kara's just too lazy to do it herself apparently, and he goes in disguised as a fake Maxwell Lord while Alex distracts the real one with some good old-fashioned sex appeal.
I'm Major. I roar. I swear I'm not a whore.
So they talk over dinner. Lord is still very tight-lipped about what the Kryptonians were after when they attacked his building, and so, Alex being Alex, she of course finds a way to make this all about Supergirl.
Are you threatened because she's a woman?
More likely it's because she's a dangerous, immature idiot whose superheroics tend to cause lots of collateral damage, but sure, let's go with the sexism thing. Because how can we pass up this golden opportunity to teach all the impressionable kids watching at home a valuable lesson that judging and objectifying people on the basis of their sex is wrong?
I am not immune to the allure of James Olsen wearing a shirt that's unbuttoned one too many.
Except when women do it. Then it's just fine. Meanwhile, Kara insists on helping Wynn bring his dad to justice, and he takes the opportunity to remind her for the millionth time how awesome she is, which technically meets her quota of obligatory emotional validation for the week. They don't use the H word, but I'm counting it. So Wynn opens up the toy his father left on his desk. Because the feds wouldn't have taken that to examine themselves or anything, he recognizes the tech in it and thinks the toy man must be hiding out in his old toy factory. Because for some reason that wasn't the first place the feds looked for him. Jesus, the FBI are so incompetent you have to wonder if they aren't secretly being run by General Lane. Supergirl goes to scope the factory out, but fails to capture the toy man after he traps her in quicksand. And she doesn't immediately bust out of there. Why exactly? May I remind you that this woman has super strength and can fly, but it takes her this long to escape from fucking quicksand? Well, at least the incompetence is being distributed equally amongst all our heroes this week. Speaking of which, Henshaw has entered the super-secret locked room and found the living weapon Lord has in there, but he's discovered by a guard and has no choice but to erase the man's mind, because just knocking him unconscious wouldn't have been cruel enough, I guess. Beats me why Henshaw had to resort to this. I mean, either way, Lord is gonna know somebody was in there. A guard wakes up in the locked superweapon room with complete amnesia while the security tapes were mysteriously erased. Probably points to there being some kind of funny business. And because Lord is the only character who's taking his anti-incompetence pills, he just looks at the backup security tapes and gets clued in anyway. I'd like to state once more for the record that this whole mess could have been easily avoided if Supergirl had just done the break-in herself. Unfortunately for our heroes, the only person on the show who's not such a dumbass that this wouldn't occur to them is the guy whose building they just broke into. But here's where the episode takes a brief turn into Doesn't Suckville. Peppered throughout the mind-numbing idiocy are scenes with Winn and Kara discussing Winn's father. Surprisingly, they are well-written and well-acted to the point that they feel really out of place on a show like this. These two really connect over their shared experience of having psychotic parental figures. Winn is afraid he might turn out like his father, Kara comforts him like a good friend would. These scenes are actually very sweet, not to mention more personal and meaningful than any scene Kara's ever shared with James. They're having a really nice moment here until Winn goes and makes it awkward. Kara's not sure how to react to that, I guess because Winn's muscles aren't big enough, so he excuses himself into the hall where he immediately gets kidnapped completely unbeknownst to the Kryptonian with super hearing who's 20 feet away.
Or did you forget I had super hearing?
Well, when the plot calls for it. Toyman wants Winn to kill the man who stole his inventions back in the day, or he'll blow up a convention hall full of people because he thinks turning his son into a murderer and getting him sent to prison will bring them closer. It makes sense to him somehow. But Winn can't go through with it, and Supergirl arrives to hopefully not make things worse as Toyman gets pissed and triggers the bombs he planted in the hall to detonate. Okay, now, remember that relative timescale thing I mentioned earlier? Well, it's time to revisit that because I have no idea how else to explain what happens next. Toyman sets the bombs to explode in 5 seconds, so Supergirl takes off, scans the building with her X-ray vision, locates all 10 bombs, herds every person in the hall to one side of the building, and heat visions the sprinklers to get everything soaked. By my count, all this takes her about 13 seconds. But somehow, someway, from Toyman's perspective, only 1 second has passed. Then she freezes all the water and that's the other 4 seconds. Kaboom. Good God, the amount of temporal physics being bent over the table in this scene would make Doc Brown's head spin.
Great Scott.
So Toyman is captured and disaster is narrowly averted, I guess, but honestly I don't know what the big deal was. 10 bombs just exploded, which should have been more than enough to level the entire building, and yet there doesn't seem to be any damage whatsoever. Basically, the writers, set designers, production team, editors, everyone who had a hand in putting this scene together are all crowded around the zero fucks given table, and just like the cool table at my high school cafeteria back in the day, I'm shut out. Well, zippity fucking doodah. Where the hell did I put that noose? So James decides to stop being wishy-washy about his hot girlfriend working at Catco, but Kara's still not happy about it. Winn confesses his feelings to her for a fear that bottling them up would make him go insane like his father, but Kara's not really digging that either, so she just nopes out. And Alex thinks she's got Maxwell Lord's number, but unfortunately for her, even though she seems to have more jobs than any other 5 characters combined, detecting hidden cameras is not one of them. Yet. Childish Things is kind of a tale of 2 shows. There is a redeeming factor about this episode, and that's the Winn storyline. It helps that Winn tends to be one of the more consistent and less frustrating characters from a writing standpoint, because his first turn in the spotlight actually gives him some good material to work with. Not the stuff with his father, mind you, that was as terrible as everything else, but the scenes where he talks about his father, reveals his backstory, confesses his fears of turning out like his father, were good enough that they made me feel bad they weren't taking place in an episode that wasn't hilariously awful the other 90% of the time. Don't give the writers that much credit though, there's way more bad than good here. Everything with the Toy Man is so cartoonishly stupid it wouldn't pass muster if it were happening in an actual cartoon. And his motivations don't even make sense either. Supposedly, he's doing all this out of anger that his son was taken from him, but then he manipulates Wynn into doing something that would almost certainly result in his death. And it doesn't help that everyone else involved is a fucking idiot. These feds don't seem to have a clue how to do their jobs, firing on someone who isn't resisting arrest, not bothering to collect key pieces of evidence or search the most likely place their target would be hiding. I'm pretty sure they were only written into this episode to make Team Supergirl look less incompetent by comparison. No small feat, I assure you. Then there's the Henshaw subplot, which felt completely forced. Alex and Kara are so adamant that they need Henshaw for the Lord Technologies operation to work, but they never actually tell us why. And when Supergirl could have easily performed the operation herself with much less risk of getting caught or discovered, and the episode never even tries to explain why she can't or won't do so, that's a pretty glaring omission. Add in the relative timescale nonsense, which turned the climax into a complete clusterfuck, and there was just no saving this one. The first episode to focus on Wynn does manage to do right by his character, but everything else is downright inexcusable. Having said all that, I might have been willing to cut them a little bit of slack because of the Wynn stuff, if not for one final insult. Because the writers really wanted to add some poison to the knife before they twisted that sucker for all it's worth, the episode commits the unforgivable sin of casting Emma Caulfield and then completely misusing her. F*** you, show. Let me know down below what you thought of this video, and while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, and follow me on Twitter using the link in the description box so you'll always be notified when new videos get uploaded. I talk movies, TV, comics, trailers, and more, so if you like what you see here, stay tuned, and I'll be back real soon with my next stop on this voyage of the damned. Until then, over. Out.
I'm an elite agent with an expertise in analyzing speech patterns and body language.